We have come a very long way in this series, and we have explored many different aspects of reality that the foundation theory can explain very well. First, we found that the foundation is self-sufficient, that it is independent and does not depend on anything else, that it is necessary, that it has a necessary existence, and that it has eternally existed. Next, we showed how the foundation is purely actual. This simply means that the foundation for reality has no fundamental potentiality, but is instead simple by having no arbitrary limits. Finally, we showed how the foundation has a mental, moral, and rational nature, and can be the ground for mind, matter, morals, reason, and value. Now, given all these attributes, we are still missing one important attribute. In fact, the attribute that I will be describing is the ground for all the other attributes. In this video, I'm going to provide an argument for what this attribute is, and I will demonstrate that once we establish this foundational attribute, then we can finally understand the true nature of the foundation. Let's begin. In a previous video, we showed how the foundation for reality has a moral and valuable nature. However, there is another thing we need to understand. By pure actuality, the foundation lacks arbitrary limits. Because of this, the foundation lacks limits in its value, and therefore the foundation must have value without a limit. The foundation has value without limits by being perfect. Something that is perfect is something that lacks defects and has supreme value. The foundation has no defects, for a defect is a limit in some positive respect. However, since the foundation has no limit in value, then the foundation has supreme value because anything less would mark a limit in its total value. In this sense then, the foundation for reality is purely positive without any inner limit or imperfection. So, the foundation for reality is perfection. Perfection is the most powerful property conceivable. From perfection flows the ultimate base of every positive quality. To be perfect means to be purely positive. A perfect foundation includes the greatest conceivable concentration of positive qualities. And in this way, then, we can call a perfect foundation maximally great. The term maximally great describes the highest degree of greatness. Perfection is the highest degree of greatness. However, in order for something to be maximally great, it must have great-making features to the highest degree. The first thing is that the foundation has some power. The foundation also has no arbitrary limits, and so the foundation's power cannot be arbitrarily limited. It has unlimited maximal power. Now, as we pointed out before, the foundation also has a rational nature, which means it cannot violate the laws of logic. The foundation does not have the power to do impossible things, such as lifting up an unliftable stone, since an unliftable stone is an impossible stone. The foundation has possible powers without arbitrary limits. However, it does not have impossible powers, because if it did, then it would not be the foundation of reason, and thus it would lack perfection. So the only way that the foundation could be perfect is if it followed the laws of logic perfectly. Next, the foundation also has maximal knowledge. A perfect foundation has maximal power, and among the possible powers is the power to know something. However, since we already established that the foundation has a mental nature, then it would have no arbitrary limits in regards to knowledge. Furthermore, knowledge is itself valuable. The more knowledge, then, the more value, and hence a maximally valuable foundation has maximal knowledge. If its knowledge were arbitrarily limited, then it would not be maximally valuable. Finally, the foundation cannot be bad because it is perfect. The foundation of a moral landscape is itself good. and hence a perfect foundation is purely positive, while a bad foundation is not purely positive, and so a perfect foundation lacks badness. Perfection unifies all of the attributes of the foundation. Perfection is the deepest attribute from which all positive attributes are predicted. Perfection is the ultimate root of reality. The mental, material, moral, mathematical, and valuable aspects of our world all emerge from this single root. They all flow from the perfection of the foundation. From here, perfection predicts the perfect way of being, which is the foundation of all moral principles. From perfection flows perfect knowledge, which is the foundation of all principles of reason and mathematics. Moreover, a perfect mind has reason to create a material world suitable for other minds. The perfection of the foundation, then, successfully predicts every dimension of our world. Now comes the best part. We can unify all of these concepts into a single argument. Premise 1. Reality in total is self-sufficient with no outside cause or explanation. This premise is supported in the early part of our series. Nothing can exist beyond the totality of all things. The totality of all things, by definition, is all that exists, and so nothing outside of existence can cause existence. Premise 2. Nothing can be self-sufficient without a perfect foundation. This premise can be supported from multiple angles. An imperfect foundation generates two problems, which is the problem of arbitrary limits and the problem of construction. The first problem is internal to the foundation itself. An imperfect foundation would have arbitrary limits. Limits not only add unnecessary complexity, but they are not self-sufficient. By the uniformity of explanation, all limits alike have an explanation beyond themselves, and therefore the foundation of all limits has no arbitrary limits. This means that it has no arbitrary limits in value, and so the foundation can only be perfect and have purely positive attributes. Second, without a perfect foundation, we have construction problems. An imperfect foundation lacks the materials for constructing reality. Reality includes minds, matter, morals, and reason itself. A foundation of these things must then include the resources to produce these things. Only a perfect mental and moral nature includes the resources to construct the mental and moral dimensions of our world. Additionally, even if reality is infinite or has existed forever, you would still need the foundation. In fact, a foundation explains why things could exist forever or why there could be an infinite regress. A necessary foundation would predict some kind of infinite persistence. Now, this doesn't mean that it requires an eternal universe or an infinite regress. However, it does explain that if the universe is infinite in the past, then the foundation explains why it can persist for so long. It is still debatable whether the foundation is timeless, but regardless, an infinite regress or an eternal universe does not avoid the premise. And so the conclusion, therefore, reality has a perfect foundation. This conclusion simply follows from the premises before. Premise 3. This perfect foundation is what we call a perfect God. This is simply stating the obvious implication of what the nature of the foundation is. In conclusion, therefore, a perfect God exists. Now, I understand that many people would be hesitant to accept this conclusion. However, it does logically follow. One objection to the argument is simply that an imperfect foundation would be able to explain our world. However, I think it's important to realize simplicity and explanatory power. First, an imperfect foundation cannot be the source for all the aspects of reality. An imperfect foundation requires multiple sources to ground different things. An imperfect foundation has to have different sources to ground matter, mind, morals, reason, and value. In fact, one could say that an imperfect foundation may be only able to account for one of these things. So it may be able to explain the existence of matter, but not able to explain the existence of morals, value, or reason, and so it has to have different sources for those things. A perfect foundation, by contrast, grounds all these things with only one source, which is perfection. So, a perfect foundation is simpler and can explain everything, while an imperfect foundation would need to be more complex by having different sources for these different things. So then, a perfect foundation explains all of the complexities of the world by a simple root, while an imperfect foundation does not. More features of reality are explained by a perfect, simple root, while imperfection lacks this explanatory power at its own simple root. Another objection to the argument is that a perfect God requires supernaturalism. So then, God is something beyond the natural, and is an extra ontological category. But since we can explain all of reality without invoking the extra ontological category of the supernatural, then therefore, an imperfect foundation and naturalism is simpler. However, this misunderstands what the perfect God is. This God is not beyond nature, rather he is the source of nature itself. He is the perfect foundation and root of all aspects of reality. God is the foundation of everything. He is the foundation of mind, matter, morals, reason, and value. God is not a limited being like Zeus on Mount Olympus. This God is not a flying spaghetti monster. This God is perfect, and this God is before all things that have been made. Without this perfect God, there is nothing, no math, no logic, no reason to produce under minds, and no universe. Absolutely nothing would exist without the perfect God. As we pointed out before, a perfect foundation explains all things by a simple root. Perfection is the root by which all things are explained. Imperfection doesn't have the same root to explain mind, matter, morals, reason, and value. In order for an imperfect foundation to be the explanation of reality, one would have to say that there are many unexplained necessary truths. So then, the reason that the universe is fine-tuned is because the universe is necessary, or the foundational laws have to be a certain way. Or the reason that objective morality exists is because it is necessarily a part of our reasoning, and the reason that mathematics is applicable to our universe is simply because it is necessary. However, all of these things are unexplained necessary truths. They are all truths about the world that are just there without a simple foundational root. However, a perfect foundation provides the root necessary to ground all necessary truths. And so, since a perfect foundation has the least amount of unexplained necessary truths, then it is a simpler hypothesis. On the perfect foundation, more of the necessary truths can be explained by the simple root. This speaks to explanatory power. Thus, the simpler theory, which has the fewest unexplained necessary truths, will also be the one with the most explanatory power. This makes the perfect foundation theory as the best theory for why reality exists. And so, it is now complete. All things point to perfection as the foundation of reality. And this perfect foundation is a perfect God.